Library this afternoon. I'm Peter Ratcliffe, the co-executive director. I want to especially thank my colleague Bailey Ethier, who's handling the tech. We will be, or Bailey will be, live streaming this conversation to Facebook, and we are recording it. We can suggest that if you're concerned about your boss or an agent of your boss knowing that you're engaged in this conversation, we suggest you change your name to Jess Alexander and let it roll from there. We also want to encourage you to leave your video on so that we're not just talking to black boxes and we have a sense of visually at least who's with us, unless you're on the down low in terms of the boss and you want to stay invisible. The plan today is to hear from workers at the half-price stores here in the Twin Cities who have organized, hopefully hear from workers at some other bookstores who have also organized. I think all the presentations will be fairly short, and then we would like to have a conversation. I encourage you to use the chat if you want to put in comments or questions, or when we finish the first round of presentations, we can go to raising your real hand or your mechanical hand, or however you would like to be recognized. The idea for this panel sort of started about a month ago in a conversation that we were having once a month. We convene people through the Eastside Freedom Library to talk about labor history, and labor history happened right up until we started this conversation today. And we realized that there are experts of all sorts, including historians, journalists, economists, politicians, trying to make sense out of what's happening to working people and what's happening in the labor movement in this period of the pandemic. And we started a conversation that started to go, I think, in a pretty grim direction. And then one of the workers who's been involved in organizing bookstore workers here in the Twin Cities started to talk about the various things that workers have been doing at half-price books, and the conversation took a decided turn in a hopeful and positive direction. We want to hear from workers themselves, not pointy-headed scholars and experts. This is a great opportunity for us to hear from workers to tell us why they've organized, how they've organized, how organizing is changing the nature of their work lives. So as we began a conversation with UFCW 1189 and UFCW 663, both locals of which have incorporated some of the half-price workers, we got the idea of pulling this panel together today. And I'm going to get out of the way and turn things over to Jess Alexander from UFCW 663. I do want to thank Claire Vandenberg from 1189 and Jessica Hazen from 663 for their efforts to pull this together today. And of course, even more, their efforts to help workers become empowered and make their lives better. Jess is going to chair this first part of the conversation. I'm going to try to keep track of comments and questions in the chat, and we'll move into that phase after we've had an opportunity to hear from the presenters. So, Jess Alexander, you're in charge.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Alexander. I am an organizer with the Union for Retail Workers here in Minneapolis. So UFCW Local 663. We are the Minneapolis local of the United Food and Commercial Workers. It was sort of a toss-up between me and Claire Vandenberg, the organizer from Local 1189. So I want to definitely give props to Claire as well. I want to say thank you to everybody attending today and say that I am honored to be part of this event with all these workers that, really did the hard work of fighting for a union, fighting to organize, put the work in. I'm the union organizer that workers from Half Price Books contacted back in the spring of last year of 2021, about 9 or 10 months ago. That's why I'm sort of starting with a couple comments that I think are kind of interesting. So these are all, workers at Half Price Books are people who work for a national corporation doing retail work in small stores in close quarters with a lot of customers in the middle of a global health pandemic, right? That's sort of the context in which they decided to organize, decided to unionize, right? The pressure and risk of working retail during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the way their company behaved, right? Some different changes, policies, missteps that their company and a lot of companies made those same mistakes throughout this pandemic. And I think a lot of workers in retail felt very vulnerable and disempowered by the way companies were treating them during the pandemic. And workers at Half Price Books realized that to solve those things, they couldn't do it alone. They needed more power and they needed to unionize, and they got in touch with United Food and Commercial Workers. So we're going to hear from them real quick. Two things that I'd like to say to add a little bit more context though, that I think is interesting. I have a bit more of a different perspective on the retail industry as an organizer, right? Like I'm sort of at a different level than working in the store. So different perspective on the retail industry and different perspective on working life in America as an organizer. Bookstores are not necessarily a critical industry in the economy, right? They're not like truck drivers or auto manufacturing or like a huge sort of industrial or like healthcare or education, right? Like bookstores are not, they don't necessarily play that role in the economy. But I think it was nevertheless really critical and inspiring for workers at Half Price Books to unionize and for the rest of the country to see that they unionized, because they do work at a nationally known chain of stores. It's a national corporation, and it wasn't just one store that unionized. It wasn't just a little blip on the radar. It was 4 different stores. It was the majority of the whole state of Minnesota Half Price Books workers unionized, right? So this was something that wasn't just a single, I think that's important to realize. It was something big. It was really substantial. And not just for the company, but also for retail. It really sets an example to other retail workers and other workers at corporate chains that we too can organize. It's very much like the Starbucks workers. I think Starbucks has gotten more attention in the news, but Half Price Books is probably second to that as far as, hey, retail workers, frontline pandemic workers, corporate chain workers are unionizing. It can be done, and they are doing it. And I think this conversation, we should keep that in mind, that they're sort of at the tip of the spear of retail workers organizing. Another thing that's maybe just more cerebral for me is that bookstore workers are sort of working at a bookstore is sort of a special thing, right? I think from my experience, meeting so many people at Half Price Books, people don't work at bookstores just because it's a job in my neighborhood. Seems like people get a job at bookstores because they like books. They like being around books and culture and being part of that conversation about life in America. And I think that really contributed to them organizing, that sense of agency, that sense that of being thoughtful people about how life should be in America for workers, and being around books and just like thinking about the world, I think they took that upon themselves and thought, hey, our life should be better, right? Like I read about labor struggles, I read about all this stuff, and I can make that happen in my own life. So I don't know. I don't know how that fits into the conversation, but I'm going to be interested to hear from people, like how that fits in. I think one thing obviously is just the sense of community, the fact that workers at different stores so quickly were able to meet each other and get each other involved, even if they didn't necessarily know each other. There was something common there, and so I think I'm excited to hear about that today, and that's sort of my starting comments. And I think I'm going to pass it on with that. I'm going to pass it on to Aaron Kerr from the Roseville Half Price Books.
Thanks, Jess. Peter, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear me okay? I always like to check that. Two things I'm going to do right now is watch the time, and because I like to talk. So Peter, you know what to do if I go over, right? Say, hey, Aaron, time to stop, right? Thanks. And I'm also going to try and not yell at the screen. My kids are always saying, hey, Dad, don't yell at the screen. So I'm going to try and do that. I think Jess did a really, really good job of summing a lot of this up, and I'm going to try and add to it. If you are, first of all, if you are a worker here, and you are part of a union, I just want to thank you for being here. And it's thank you for being here, and thank you for showing your support. I also want to say to all of the workers out there who have not organized and have or not unionized, that this has been a very, very rewarding experience. It's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. And it is a crazy, crazy roller coaster ride of stuff that you have to do. And I would add that you have to do it. It is up to you at your store. If you want to do this, you have to do it. You have to make this happen. I love our reps at UFCW. They're great. They answer our questions and everything, but we have done this. We have put the time in. We have met. We have talked. We have organized. And it is a very, very, it's a very great experience to do that, just to get together, just to talk about the issues. It is made my job a job I really want to be at because of the people that I'm working with. I'm just going to move on to some of these questions. They kind of gave us a few questions to talk about. Why did we organize? This started back in 2020 when, during the pandemic, many of us were laid off or furloughed, and only half of us came back. And we understood that that was going to happen, but the company was not transparent about that. That was one issue. And then we also had COVID issues that were not resolved. That lifting mask mandates and things that, like, here we are working in the store, dealing with people in close proximity, and for the company to kind of not even ask the employees what they thought about that was another issue. And then a third issue was we were overworked. We were really, really busy. We were half-staffed, and we just did not have enough people to keep up with everything. And once again, the company didn't get back to us. And I think prior to all this, these things were all kind of happening, not the pandemic, of course, but other things were happening. We all kind of just went, I guess that's just the way it is. And the great thing about getting together and talking about this is we figured out we have these issues, and this should not happen. This should not be the way it is. And so what did it mean to organize? Solidarity. Like just that is it's a word that gets used a lot, but it's a great word, and it's really, really true. I have gotten so close to my coworkers now. I know them now. They're my best friends now. And not only at my store, but all the other stores. When we started communicating with them, it was like all of these like pieces just all came together. And it was a great, amazing thing to make that connection. Just like, wow, just another reason why I love this company is the people that I get to work with. And then what are we doing with our power? You know what? The company's listening to us now. They never listened to us before. They came to our store. They came to our store. The CEO, Boots, yeah. Half Price Books folks, Boots came to our store, sat down in a room with us, and we told her the issues that we were having. And now we had I'll let someone else maybe talk about this. We just had a meeting on Friday because we said, you know what? We need a COVID policy and we don't have one, and we want it. And representatives from our 4 stores sat down with the company and said, via Zoom, of course, and said, and they were like, what do you want? And we told them this is what we want. And they got back to us and said, okay, we're going to work on it. So that's never happened. So what are we doing? Collective power here. We're all coming together. They're finally listening to us. And I also just want to add, if you want to do this, it's a big thing is you have to talk to you have to have these conversations. One person talk to another person, see how they're feeling about it. Then those 2 people talk to 2 more people, and those people talk to 2 more people. And pretty soon you realize you're all having these issues and you're coming together and you're coming up with a framework to make your workplace better. I did pretty good, only a minute over, I think. I'm going to hand this off to you, Peter, and then you can introduce somebody else. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Aaron. Did you have an order of people, Jess, or should we just?
Let's go. Why don't you speak next, Rachel?
Great.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Beaver Scott. I work at our Coon Rapids location. I've been there now for about 15 years. I work at a bookstore because I'm extremely passionate about books and I flourish in a retail environment. I've got a love for children's literature and story time, and it's just the perfect environment for me. But keeping it a place that I can continue to work is very important to me. But I kind of wanted to tell a bit of the story about how we got here. Our Roseville and our St. Paul locations were kind of the ones that started organizing with Jess in the beginning, if I'm correct. We had sort of heard whispers at our store of this thing going on. And so I finally got in contact with somebody at our Roseville location and I was like, what's going on? And we passed some information back and forth, but they shared with me like, hey, we're actually doing this and we're about to go public and it's not just us, it's our St. Paul store too. What do you think over at Northtown? And I didn't really know what to say at the time, but I had this information and I had this knowledge that this, was about to go public. And I was a bit scared too, but I started a conversation with a few of my coworkers at my store. We just started a Facebook conversation and I said, hey, listen, I need to tell you something. Please don't say this to anybody. Don't throw me under the bus, but this is happening. What do you think of it? And they all responded extremely positively. They were all immediately on board. They wanted more information. And it was pretty easy from there, I'd have to say. As long as you stand together and you're kind of impervious against the things that corporate says to you, unionization is actually kind of a breeze, actually. At least it was for us. I think just being at a bookstore a lot of us tend to be pro-union to begin with, just because we're exposed to all this literature and everything about it. And so before we knew it, we had filed as well. It was quick enough where we actually got in on the same election as our St. Paul and our Roseville store, and we unionized. And yeah, so here we are. And currently we, like Aaron said, just sat down and bargained some COVID policy with the company, and that was very rewarding. It was nice to be listened to. But I would say that if you're somebody out there and you're considering unionizing, just go for it. Start up that conversation with your coworkers. That's really the first most important step, I would say. And I haven't been paying attention to the time, so I have no idea where I am or if I said that too fast.
So that sounds like you, or it's about it, Rachel?
Yeah.
You'll definitely get some questions to answer. Kristen, will you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Kristen Tamayo. I work at our St. Louis Park Half Price Books location. It's one of the busiest locations in the country with not very much space. So that situation, especially being in the middle of a pandemic, has been chaotic. So this whole thing started for us shortly after the other stores. They came to us the day they went public, told us what was going on. I actually shouted an expletive of joy when I saw the the flyers that they had made. I said, yes, we need to do this. We all just, COVID brought a lot of the things to light that we had been struggling with. And we just kind of, like Aaron said, okay, this is just how it is. But having to endure the same things with half the staff and in the middle of a pandemic has made us realize, like, hey, we need to do something here. And we all love what we do. We love our job and we want to keep doing it, which is why we did this. If we hated it, we would have quit, and we have been saying at our store, like, we'd love to be able to say, I love my job and not have a but at the end of it. Just say, I love my job, period. We want to be able to advocate for ourselves. Like Aaron said, they listen to us now. Like, we were able to sit down and they promised us within a certain time frame they would have these COVID policies that we asked them for, and that never would have happened if we hadn't done this. So and I think the most important thing and like the best thing that's been happening with this, like Aaron said, is building these relationships, not just with people at our own stores, but between stores. Like, for the whole time I'd been there, I'd call other stores and I'd have no idea who I was talking to. But now we call and say, hey, I'm looking for this book, and we know who's on the other end of the line, and we have a little chat, and we're all friends. We talk all the time. We meet up on Zoom now that it's cold, but it's great. Getting to know everyone and getting to know what everyone's concerns are in the workplace, and making sure everyone's voice is heard and everyone's treated fairly and equally at work. There are actually 2 other stores in our district that haven't unionized, but we've still been in touch with some of them saying, hey, what are you guys concerned about? Can we address these concerns for you? Because even though they're not quite there, we still want to make sure they're being advocated for. And it's such a great feeling to know that we all have each other's backs, and, no matter what may come. It was a little bit trickier at our store. We had a couple people that were on the fence, afraid of losing their job or backlash from management because of the organizing. But actually, some of the talks with corporate is what helped them realize that we did need to make this decision. So that's how that went. And it can be a little scary, not knowing what's going to happen, but it's been so rewarding and so great. And we should be able to start bargaining our first contract here pretty soon. We're all very excited about it. And yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who's interested, go for it. I mean, yeah, it can be tricky, but it's really great just to build those relationships with people, and build this network of solidarity in your workplace, and know that you you've all got each other's back and you're all looking out for each other, and we got to stick together, you know?
Thank you, Kristen. And now Zoe from the St. Paul store.
Hello, my name is Zoe Berkovitz. I work at the St. Paul store in Highland Park. And thanks to all of you three for putting into words so many of my thoughts already. I am probably the one who's been working at Half Price Books for the least amount of time. I was hired in April of last year. And I was thrown into a extremely busy summer where we the workload was just crazy and our staff was really small. And I was hired as a temp. And I think one of the first inklings I got that, you know, maybe we could organize here, or at least that we should, was my manager at the time who hired me on was explaining to me my temp status, and that after my temp status ended and I would be hired on as a full regular employee full time, that after my temp status ended, I would have another 90-day introductory period where my full benefits and sick time and paid time off wouldn't like fully kick in. So, and my store manager seemed like he was very frustrated that he just couldn't do anything about it. It was out of his hands. And so I started realizing, like, wow, like so many of the decisions are made by this sort of like ephemeral, like corporate entity that we don't really have any connections with. And so I realized over the months, like, even our store managers, like we were all kind of in the same boat of struggling to have control over store operations. But, you know, there's all these things coming down from the top that we can't control or even like really easily raise issues with. And so organizing has been really empowering for us to realize that, like, we deserve a say in the things that are being changed or not being changed at our stores. Just because we are a chain doesn't mean that we, you know, shouldn't have a say in that kind of thing. I think organizing for us really started to kick off when we started hanging out outside of work over the summer and into the early fall when cases were really low, and we could easily meet up with each other in person. And throughout the whole process, I've been kind of surprised, and something that's been great is how like, I guess, analog it's all been. Like, the work is really just like talking and meeting with people and like having real concrete conversations. It's not as easy as just like sharing an infographic with someone or like inviting them to a Facebook event. Like, you really have to have hard conversations with people you have to see every day, and you might not agree on some stuff, and you just have to work through that in a very real way. So that was something I really appreciated. What made it easier is all the support we had from our friends at UFCW, and the fact that there were 2 union branches helping us out was also really cool and unique. They gave us so much helpful guidance throughout, sort of like really helped us visualize what was coming next, like many steps ahead, but also like helped us focus on our immediate goals, down to like, they quickly learned the names of every single person who worked at all of our stores that were organizing and checked in with us, like who's talking to who this week, how did this conversation go, like let's all meet and, you know, talk about, you know, who we think is starting to change their minds. So that is really like a big part of the work of organizing, is just like really keeping track of those little things. Yeah, and I think I would echo that something that sort of turned some people over to the pro-union side over at our store was also the company's response. They really handled it poorly in a lot of ways and turned people off. One of my coworkers who has been with the company for a really long time and, you know, has like friends in the company and was sort of more on the fence, like over the course of our organizing and over the course of our conversations, he told me that he came to realize that he'd given the best years of his life to this company and he hadn't really gotten anything back. And that wasn't something he realized until he sort of had to come face to face with them and see them just shut down. So sometimes it really does take like really hard, painful experiences to push you to that point. But yeah, it's been great. I would highly recommend it. I think every single worker should have a union.
Hello again. I do not see Stacy here today. We were hoping that there'd be someone from, go ahead, Aaron.
Stacy informed me that she had a minor emergency at her work. And she did get a hold of me and she said she's really, really sorry and she wanted to thank for the invite, but she could not make it, unfortunately.
So Stacy is in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, so she's at Book People in Austin, Texas. And I reached out to her and they organized, I believe, in 2018. And so they now have a contract and it's a great contract. She sent it to me and it's got some really fun, very, very creative things in it. So, and she talked with me for a while about their experience organizing and kind of things to do and things to watch out for. And it was really great to make a connection with someone outside of Minnesota who at a bookstore who had already done it. Difference being they were a single location as opposed to our company that has 124 stores. But there were some differences, but a lot of similarities to what we experienced. And then we have also, just a heads up, have made a lot of connections to a lot of other bookstores across the country, West Coast, East Coast. And so that has been a very rewarding experience. Kind of one of the fringe benefits to doing all this is all of a sudden you start making these connections to people across the country and getting to learn about their experiences. And you kind of feel this like big Uber solidarity kind of happen. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there.
And coincidentally and unfortunately, someone who works at Politics and Prose, a bookstore in Washington, D.C., that recently organized, also had a personal emergency today. And they said I can text them questions. And there is one thing about their situation that I think is interesting. We might come back to. They couldn't be with us today either.
So I wonder, Jess, if and all of you, a couple of things come to mind that I want to frame and ask. And from my perspective as an outsider and a so-called expert. And so one of the things is, I think most of us are unaware of how large Half Price Books is, that it is the largest used book retailer in the United States. And some of the energy in the labor movement in the last decade has been around the $15 an hour minimum wage, a lot of which has been at chain businesses, a McDonald's, a Burger King, and workers organizing have often been confronted with somebody's interpretation of labor law and sometimes a judge's or the NLRB's interpretation of labor law to say either you have to organize the whole chain or, if some of these franchises are owned by different people, you can only take on the ones that have the same ownership. How have you navigated the reality that Half Price Books has, as Aaron just said, 124 stores? Are they saying to you, we're not going to negotiate a contract until you've organized all 124 stores? How is that line being expressed and engaged?
Rachel, I saw you shaking your head. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can jump in and I can field that one. So far, they haven't pushed for any more stores to organize. I don't think they would want to do that, just because, I believe that a lot of bookstores, people just view labor or unions as a positive thing to have in the workforce. No, it's just been a case by case situation. They haven't pushed to have any more of us unionize as a group or anything like that. I think they're just trying to put all these little fires out as they spring up.
Mm-hmm. And then I wonder, listening to you
Hey,
about.
Peter, are you about to ask a sort of a different question?
Yes. Please
Can I-
go ahead, Jess, please.
Will people sort of tolerate me being an organizer jabbering on this? The question that Peter asked, I think, is really important, because that can be a real barrier for a lot of people organizing. We saw Starbucks, the company, doing that exact thing of insisting that workers at this store can't organize unless they can get, it can't organize separately from the stores in the whole region or the whole district. I think Rachel's absolutely correct that here in Minnesota, if Half Price, and that is let me just say, that is a tactic companies use to make it harder for people to organize. They aren't doing it on principle. They aren't doing it on some sort of sense of, there's no law or anything that requires them to do that. Companies are saying that stuff as a tactic to make it harder to organize. And here in Minnesota, it would have backfired on them, because so many workers at a majority of the stores were already ready to vote yes, that it would have swept up the other two stores, even if there wasn't a majority of those stores.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have resulted in more stores. And that sort of exposes why it's a tactic. If companies were consistent about this sort of thing, then they would have insisted that those other two stores be unionized as well, basically. The reason I wanted to jump in is because I think it's important for people to realize that it's pretty common that you can have a union election at just your work site. There's some details you need to work out. How much transfer is there between workers at different locations? But oftentimes you can actually just unionize your location. And I really want to emphasize that for people who are thinking that may make it harder for them to organize. Do not let that stop you. Talk to an organizer and figure out how to work around that, so that does not prevent you from organizing a union at your workplace.
Thank you, Jess.
And what were you going to say, Kristen?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even though the four of us at our four stores organized separately, we are going to be bargaining a contract for all four of our stores together. So we're still going to be working as a collective unit, even though we voted separately. So, and some of those things will impact the other two stores that aren't even unionized at all.
Mhm.
So collective power.
Yeah, thank you.
Honestly,
Clear-
these benefits are going to benefit the other 120 stores in the whole company. Like, they are going to see benefits from this effort that you all are putting in.
Right.
Claire, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, sorry, my video is not working. Technology, but I just wanted to mention that while the company didn't try that tactic to sort of dilute the unit and have more stores vote, they did try a slightly different tactic where they said, that these shift leads were actually supervisors, and that's really common. And I don't know if any of the workers want to touch on that, but it was kind of ridiculous because there are about 15-ish people at each store, and like 4 of them are shift leads. So they were saying they had 5 or 6 people supervising another 10. So there are a lot of tactics that companies will try, and it's up to the workers to overcome them, which is unfair, but the way it is, and we always have to be prepared.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, that shift lead thing, another, tactic that they tried to use. I know at least for my store, it wouldn't have really made a difference because we were pretty much unanimous in our decision. I think they were hoping that some of the shift leads would want to be, excluding them would hurt us in some way. But all it really did was just delay the process of us being able to vote. And that was the reason, just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks and make it take longer than it needs to. So we just had to be patient and know that we'll get there. This is not a quick thing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a lot of work, and we're still working every day. I see someone had a question about the shift lead thing. Shift leads have a little bit more, I guess, responsibility than us booksellers. We were the entry-level booksellers. They're not supervisors in the sense that they do scheduling or hiring or any of that. But they, they do have keys, and they, Rachel, you might be able to explain a little bit better.
Let me just clarify. My question is, why is that? Like, why would that take the wind out of my sail if I were trying to organize at a place?
I guess I'm trying to figure out in terms of like, because with our store, it really didn't matter. But can any one of you try to explain a little better why that would have?
Let me offer a little labor history on this, that part of the issue of whether you could organize at one store or you have to organize a whole chain. The labor law in the United States gives the National Labor Relations Board and the regional labor boards the authority to, quote unquote, define a bargaining unit. And in the 30s, when there was so much organizing that went on, a very divisive issue was whether foremen should be included in the union or foremen should be excluded. And I think the more radical people argued the foreman ought to be in the union with everybody else, but ultimately the bureaucratic authorities decided to carve them out. And when I listened to all of you who have spoken today, talking about relationship building and solidarity, it's just so clear that this is what happens in organizing, and the opponents of organizing, whether they're the owners or the attorneys that they hire or consultants that they turn to, are always looking to sow division. How can they divide people? And that ultimately that's what makes unions weaker, even if they do get a standing, if they're being divided by management or by bureaucratic authorities. So it's very inspiring to listen to you talking about the relationships and solidarity.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Thank you
Please.
so much for that detour for probably only me, because everyone else in the room understands it. But my question is, so there's no legal reason why a foreman couldn't participate. There is simply, it's a social divisive thing, like appealing to the next lowest rung to kind of peel that off of the potential collective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
In labor law, there actually is a distinction about supervisors having the right to organize. Once the union is organized, there is less restriction on whether or not they can be in the union. And that's starting to get into the weeds a little bit, but there is something there. There is something in the law that talks about supervisors. And so use to their benefit to say, if they know that most of their supervisors would vote against a union, then companies are going to be silent and hope that the supervisors get to vote. If they know most of the supervisors are going to vote for a union, then companies are going to say, oh, supervisors don't get to vote because the law says they don't get to vote, right? That's kind of the game they play.
So if I can ask another question that I think is of a similar order, I heard several of you say that there was a meeting last week with quote unquote corporate. And I think those of us who are outside the world of unions and collective bargaining, from what if we've heard anything from mass media or movies, or, we think that there is something called collective bargaining. It's about getting a contract. The contract will last for 3 years or 5 years. And then it's on paper, the ink dries, and you have to live with it until you bargain another contract. And so it's exciting to me to hear that you're already having, I'm not sure what the right noun is, bargaining, conversations. You're talking to management and they're listening to you, and you're talking about the terms of employment, and they are preparing to change the terms of employment without first saying, well, we have to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement and you need a lawyer and we'll have our lawyer, and they'll all go off to a hotel and then someday you'll hear what was decided in that room. This is very different from what we've been led to expect. And again, I think it's empowering and inspiring to hear. So, because one of the things these bureaucrats and management will often do is say, this is an issue that is not a bargainable issue. We're going to define wages, benefits, hours. But if you wanted to talk about safety protections, or you wanted to talk about which books are on the shelves and which books would you like to see the store carry, and they might say, oh, I remember in the early 2000s when there was labor conflict at Northwest Airlines, and the mechanics union went to management and said, why are you spending so much money repainting the tail fins on the airplanes? We think that money could be used for better purposes. Management said, we don't have to talk to you about that issue. That's not a bargainable issue. And I think you're doing an amazing job of expanding the scope of what's typically understood to be collective bargaining. And there's a lot we can all learn from that. I don't know, Jess or Claire or any, please.
I actually want to jump in and just for legal reasons say the discussions we've had so far are not technically contract bargaining. Mm-hmm. So the company can't come back and say, well, we agreed to this. We have not begun bargaining or negotiating a collective bargaining agreement. These are just conversations or discussions around COVID policy. I think that almost proves the point more that unions are not just this like narrowly defined bureaucracy where, well, if you have a union, they bargain a contract for you and then that's it. No, a union is the workers in the store having more of a voice to go to management with whatever they need to go to management for, and having the power, right? It's not just voice, it's the power to make management listen and hopefully get decent response. It's about power That is the word, nothing else.
Right.
Unions are about power. They're not about contracts or benefits or whatever. Those are just the result of having power.
Jackson, do you want to unmute and ask your questions?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Bailey, can you unmute Jackson?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying, Peter, but I've had conversations with Aaron about this, and I wonder what like the social role of a bookstore union could be like when it comes to other dimensions outside of just like, you know, economic issues. Like, I mean, I know a lot of people who are like very emotionally attached to their local bookstore as, you know, a place of, you know, education. And I think there's also just like a novelty to it that a lot of people have, but also just like the amount of like, you know, materials you go through, like in terms of used books, like it's almost sort of a recycling center in a way. So just stuff like that. I wonder if you all see like your union as having a social role when it comes to ecology, education, and if that's stuff like you could bargain over even.
Great. When we get 3 hands up at once, I'm going to let Jess decide.
Whoops, go ahead, Zoe.
I'm sure there are, you know, several different answers, but the one that comes to mind for me, just for like the first thing, is that if with a union we can bargain for higher wages, then we can keep the knowledgeable, passionate people who like make the stores as good as they are. Those people can stay and continue like making it an amazing place. Like we've lost several people in the last year for higher paying jobs that require like much less knowledge. But it's really like the people who work here that make it what it is and provide a lot of those benefits. So keeping those people around with good wages and benefits is something that I think a union could be really useful for.
Kristen?
Yeah, just in terms of like social, we kind of have mentioned before, like the company as a whole has this whole, you know, oh my God, what is the word? Part of their core values is like promoting literacy and, you know, recycling. Like we have recycling services for books, so we can actually recycle books, the whole things. But part of the things we've talked about as a group is just simple things like not locking our dumpsters at night. Like sometimes, you know, people will take books out of there. It's not hurting anyone, who cares? You know, and things like that, like we don't necessarily agree with, and that's not even necessarily a thing that would need to be bargained. You know, if it's just something we come to a collective agreement about as the workers, we can make changes without needing policy. You know, that's part of the great thing about doing all the networking and building the relationships is like, okay, we're all on the same page about this. We don't need to be bureaucratic about it. We can just say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. I think that was all I really had to say.
Great. Go ahead, Aaron.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to also say once we did unionize, or even before that, when we filed, we were all wearing these union buttons at work, and an unbelievable number of customers were coming in and just going, we are so glad that you guys are union now. We're huge supporters, and we're kind of like waiting for you guys to do this. We want, and because we after being at these stores for so long, you build up kind of this rapport with your customers, and you want the best for them and they want the best for you. And it's this really beautiful exchange that you sometimes have with people. And sometimes they turn into like lifelong friendships. So what Jackson was saying about it being like a very like a place where like people, you know, have fond memories of and want to keep going to, that is very, very true. You know, we're not just transient workers, you know, working, you know, at the local warehouse or whatever. We are actually at this place. This is our lives. This is a huge part of our lives. And we want it to be as a quality experience for us as for the customers as it is for us. I'd also like to add what Jackson was saying about us doing recycling. Maybe people on the call don't know, we are a used bookstore. We take in books from people. They bring them into us. We make a cash offer on them. And prior to or during COVID, or prior to COVID, we were continually having all kinds of difficulty keeping up with all of the amount of merchandise that was coming into us. It is a lot of work processing all that stuff, getting it in from people, making offers, and then trying to price it and get it out on the floor, and then trying to figure out what to do with all the stuff that we can't put on the shelves. We do have a recycling program and a donation program. A lot of that has been put on hold, unfortunately, so we're actually recycling a lot more than we want to be. And I would also like to add that prior or during COVID, we started cutting back on the amount of things that we were having people bring in. Consequently, we were able to keep up with all of the inventory. We weren't overworked. This was one of the issues that we had, because we started to say, hey, this could be a win-win. We're still getting, people are still bringing in stuff. They're still selling it to us. We're still getting good quality merchandise out and on the shelves, and we're not stressed out, and we're making money. Companies said, nope, we want you to go back to the way things were. And this is when we were still like half staff. And it pretty quickly kind of went back to the way it was. And so things like that make you think like, hey, can we actually institute something where we are not having to deal with that again? And then it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for the store. It's a win-win for customers. They don't have the obnoxiously long wait times that they have to actually sell stuff to us. So it's things like that where and also there's just less stuff being put into recycling, and there's more stuff that's being put on shelves and sold. So it's good for us, but it's good for the environment too. So I had to throw that in. Thanks.
So are there other questions out there? Or there are some people, so Rachel, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was still just
No.
hoping to expand a little bit on that last question.
Yeah.
Been here at the end. I think a lot of people view being a bookseller as kind of a passion job. You know, a lot of people understand that you don't go into this business to make money. You are positioning yourself to be around the things that you love and enjoy in life. When everything closed down due to COVID, and for those who aren't in Minnesota, there was a period where all the libraries in the area shut down. And so when that happened, we weren't deemed an essential business by standards that were used to deem essential businesses, I suppose. But when the libraries went down, we were there for our communities. We were getting books to the teachers that needed them. We were getting books into the hands of the kids that didn't have any for the summer. And so that's just kind of how we're there to support our communities. And, we hope that if we ever need that support back, that they're here for us as well.
Thank you.
May I say something?
Please.
Hi, I'm Bruce. I'm an organizer for the IWW, and we have finished organizing over at Moe's Bookstore in Berkeley. And I just wanted to share with you what that was like, but I want to do that very briefly, but I do have a question for you folks. Are you still, and this is only my knowledge because of California law, are you considered at-will employees until you have a contract that means only for cause that you can be terminated? That's one question. That's my question. But before I do that, I just wanted to share with you that I'm the organizer on that job, but the people are working today that would have liked to have been here at Moe's. And we did it a little bit differently. I just wanted to throw that out there so you know. We demanded voluntary recognition, which we got very quickly. And we had 100% support, signed cards, showed the cards. They accepted them. We began bargaining a contract. It took us 16 sessions to bargain a first contract. And we are at that point now. We're a union shop, says so in the window. And we have all the things dealt with that you all have dealt with. But the one thing that we, as the IWW, do not allow in our contracts are no strike pledges, no strike language, no strike clauses, however you want to say about them. And I just wanted to share that with you because I think that's a really important thing for us in the labor movement to think about, is that when we sign away our right to leave the job and walk off the job for whatever reason, we're giving up our most powerful weapon. And I know this has been a real issue, and I think there's some change in the air about how this is going. Anyway, I'm going to stop right there, but I did want to say thank you all for doing this. And I also would like to have that question answered regarding at will, which is a California law, perhaps only, I don't know Minnesota law. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, can you sort of repeat the exact question?
Sure. In California, anyone who is employed can be terminated for any reason or no reason, which we term at will employment. And just cause is, once you bargained a union contract, just cause becomes the basis for any kind of like disciplinary action leading to termination. I don't know if I'm over explaining it here. And so we just say at will. What Mo's management said to us was, until we bargain a contract and sign it, we still consider you at will employees, and we could fire you or terminate you at any time for any reason. Once the contract was signed, that's no longer possible. We now have procedures in place to, through the all disciplinary action is subject to the grievance procedure. And we also avoided most of what we consider to be another onerous aspect in contract, which is arbitration. We didn't avoid it completely, but we whittled it way down. So the only time arbitration is turned to by the union would be in case of terminations. For any other contract interpretations or any of that stuff, we do not. So I just wanted to reiterate, though, the first contract, any contract, we really, we don't sign no strike clauses, and we never have, and so we've also, and I don't want to go on about that. I just want to throw that out there. So that's the question. Are you still considered at will by Half Price Books? In other words, you do not have recourse to the grievance procedure or any other way to stop that short of just simple solidarity. I'll stop. Thank you.
I can talk a little bit about
the Claire can answer that.
Yeah, Jess or Claire should answer the legal aspect of that. I have something to say about it, though.
So Minnesota, like I believe every state is an at-will state. So if you're not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, however, after the vote, we expect the company to sort of behave properly through like just cause. Like if somebody gets caught stealing, that's a discussion. But if somebody they just don't like their face anymore, we would certainly expect action over a sudden termination like that, right? If that kind of answers your question.
Oh, totally answers it. Thank you. That's what I thought would be your answer. And I think that sort of comes with the territory. So thank you for bringing that up.
Aaron, I think you wanted to address this.
Yeah, a couple things, Bruce. first of all, love and solidarity. Thank you so much for being here. When we heard about you guys, we were just so excited. And I can't wait to visit. I want to go to Moe's really bad. But I also want to say two things. Number one, for us, not only did we not have, was it at will, but we also did not have a grievance procedure in existence really at all. And so that is one of the things I'm most excited about is simply have a grievance procedure for when these issues come up, when someone is going to does get fired for presumably no reason or demoted or whatever. And the other thing that has happened at Half Price Books is they're not transparent at all about when a job is posted. So sometimes a job will someone will just all of a sudden like disappear from our store, literally, and end up in another position somewhere else in the company, usually in the district. And it seems like this is all kind of this backroom stuff that's going on the corporate level. And we don't hear about it, and we have no say about it. And we are also not allowed to apply for those positions. So that is another thing that we need to get fixed and need to figure out a grievance procedure, and then posting positions and letting us know when those are coming up.
Real quick in response, yes. Also, I mean, if anybody was interested to seeing the contract that we bargained, which has a rather large, what should I say, significant COVID protocol section in the contract, which we bargained. If you'd like to see this contract, we would be more than happy to share it with you. You can, I'm not good at the chat, but you're able to message me, and I will send you a copy of our contract if you like to see it. We like to share contracts, and my email is fwbruce, F as in Frank, W as in William, Bruce at yahoo.com. Thank you.
That would be FW as in fellow worker.
Amazingly enough, yes.
Yes, yes. Kristen?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. Even though we are still technically at will, we did get a note from our CEO saying that none of us would be fired or in any way treated unfairly for our decision to unionize. So from Elite, I don't know how much that would hold up if there were to be an issue, but she has said in writing that there would not be backlash. So we'll see.
Well, that part of it is an NLRB issue, actually.
Right.
And also 2.11 in the NLRA, if you want to look at stuff about management, section 2.11 is pretty descriptive of that if you want to hear what the board has to say or the law has to say.
Claire?
I just wanted to address one other thing, just that the workers, I mean, I would really like to hear their perspective, but I was with some of them when they marched on their boss when we delivered the petition. And they did, of course, demand voluntary recognition, which Half Price Books was not willing to acquiesce to. And we had very overwhelming support for our recognition petition.
Yeah, Aaron, please.
We gathered outside the store, and the vast majority of us came in to work, walked into the store. This was in the morning before the store opened, and our manager was there. And it was a very exciting and very emotional moment to do that, to know then the first time of the history of Half Price Books that we were uttering the words, we, the employees of Half Price Books, have decided to form a union, was like complete. It was like this amazing moment. And we did ask our manager for recognition voluntary recognition. And he said he could not do that. And so we did not get that, which we weren't surprised about, but we did definitely ask for it, because obviously if you can get that, like you guys got at Moe's, that's ideal, because then you don't even have to go through the vote or worry about corporate doing all the shenanigans that they did. So that was our experience at Roseville.
Go ahead, Jess, please.
So a worker from Politics and Prose was going to try to be on this forum and couldn't be, but they also won voluntary recognition. Do people know what voluntary recognition means? Do we need to define that?
Go ahead, Jess, please.
In the US, the law says that workers have the right to go to the National Labor Relations Board and get the board to run an election process so that workers can vote and prove that they want to be unionized. If a majority of workers vote that they want to be unionized, then the employer is by law required to recognize them as unionized. But companies can also simply say, oh, you guys want to be unionized? We see that, it's obvious, we recognize you. We voluntarily recognize you as unionized. They don't have to go through that vote process. So in DC, I think it's a kind of a fun story that at Politics and Prose, it's an independent bookstore. It's in Washington, DC. It has a reputation for being a very liberal place. You know, I think this is actually relevant to what we were talking about earlier, what Jackson brought up about bookstores being kind of a community institution, especially amongst different communities of people. And Politics and Prose is a community institution amongst left-leaning people. So when the owner heard that workers wanted to unionize, they retained an anti-union law firm to advise them through that process. And either it was that the owner just had bad judgment or the law firm was giving them bad advice, and they were uninterested in voluntarily recognizing the workers there and insisted on dragging it out through an election process and all that. And so I was just texting back and forth because this person couldn't be at this forum, and I will just read a little bit of it. They were saying that it was we were extremely thankful that we didn't have to go through with an arduous labor board election, and a lot of that came from community support. There were so many customers who came into the store to defend us and emphasized to the owners that the workers should be allowed to unionize if that's what they want. So that customer support really sounds like it really made the difference there. And then of course it came down to the owners finding different legal representation. Originally we're with Jones Day, which is a known union buster, and instead they switched over to a different firm who works more agreeably with unions. So we're hoping that they continue this same spirit into bargaining. They start bargaining. Politics and Prose starts bargaining next week. So that is a little update on voluntary recognition from our comrades at Politics and Prose.
David, you got your paw up, please.
I do, my digital paw. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm David. I'm from Half Price Books in Roseville, where Aaron's from too. And a little nugget on voluntary recognition at Half Price Books specifically. When we were visited by Sharon Anderson, the CEO, and Kathy Doyle Thomas, the Chief Strategy Officer for Half Price Books, we asked them why, with the majority of us that were present fighting for union recognition, why they didn't just recognize us. And Kathy Doyle Thomas first said, oh, well, we didn't even know that was an option. And then seconds after that said, well, it wouldn't be fair to the people that don't want a union, even though, of course, a card sign is a vote of confidence for a union. So that's another one of those sort of delay. If you can stretch out the election as long as you can try to shave people off or sow discord. And that's just another way is if you don't voluntarily recognize, you got to go through the NLRB thing that I'm glad Politics and Prose did not have to go through. So that was how HPB decided to deal with that. So yeah, we made it.
Now, there's a great deal of labor history about employers and their lawyers stretching out the election process and manipulating people in the midst of it and who's eligible and all of that. So great. David, I'm jealous of your setup. Are you a DJ in another life? Great. Anyone else? There's been comments in the chat. Please feel free to identify that you'd like to speak. We'd love to hear your voice. Well, yes, Bonita, please.
Hi, I'm not with the bookstores, but I am a member of the UFCW 1189. I work at a grocery store, and I was so excited to hear that they were organizing, and I love Half Price Books. So I went into the Roseville location on a Saturday, and I was so excited to talk to the employees. And as soon as one of them said, "Oh, you should go over and talk to this person too." So I think I stopped everybody I could that day, just to say how excited I was, how great I wanted to support, and to welcome them as my future union civs. And then one of them told me, I think, that HR was going to come in that day too. So I think I had beat HR there by I don't know how long. But I'm so excited to see you guys as part of the union, and yay!
Great.
Bonita, did you work at Rainbow? Were you the one I talked to?
Yeah, I've worked at Rainbow, and now I work for Cub.
Yeah, I talked to you. Thank you. Oh, that was great. That was so great when you came in and told us that. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys and all the work. You re-inspire me.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
So I think we should wrap up. Really appreciate what everyone has shared. I want to end with a sort of making a point. The other night we had a program about what people are doing in the wake of the so-called defund the police measure having lost in the ballot in Minneapolis. And it was amazing to hear people telling stories about the practical things that they are doing in their neighborhoods, in their communities, that the issue of, are the police bad people? Is the police a bad system? There wasn't even any discussion of that. The discussion went right to what people are doing. And all of it is below the radar of what the mainstream media ever tells us. And this really seems to be another chapter in that same kind of story. And I want to say, certainly for myself, that it's inspiring to hear this, and that hopefully other people will see the video, the recording of the conversation that we've all had today, and that will inspire them to continue to build solidarity, to build relationships, and to do what's necessary to make people's lives better. And it's been really inspiring to hear you all. Any last comment from our staff people or our workers? Kristen, you can have the last word.
Okay. I just want to say, I know we've had people ask how they can show their support. We've had a lot of customers come in and ask that. One of the ways is just, shopping at the unionized locations. which is Roseville, Coon Rapids, St. Paul, and St. Louis Park. Call the stores and say you support it. Even if you're not, shopping, just call and say, hey, we support you. Like, we love hearing that. And, just spreading the word and letting people know, like, we're always willing to talk about it to people if they want to know what's really going on, besides what they hear from other, outlets, that we will gladly share our story. And we love seeing all this labor movement that's going on around the country right now. Like, the Starbucks thing is just giving me so much fuel every day. But yeah, we really appreciate all the support that we've seen so far. And it's made a huge difference in how this has gone for us. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great. And I'll just plug Eastside Freedom Library. Please follow what we're doing and the conversations that we're convening. Lots of exciting stuff coming up in the next month and beyond. Thank you all. Shop at unionized half-price books. Spread the word. Shop at Moe's when we get to Berkeley. All right. Thank you, Bailey. Thank you so much for your help with the tech.